All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Orlando Bentancor. I'm the chair of the Department of Spanish and Latin American Cultures. First of all, I want to thank our generous donors, the Martha Turner Fund, that made possible this event. And next, let me introduce the moderators and discussants. Isabel Ocampo. Isabel is a junior at Barnard studying Spanish and Latin American cultures and political science. Also, I want to introduce Sam Ortega. Sam is a junior at Barnard College, majoring in history. She is the co-chair of Chicanx Caucus, a Latinx organization on campus, and she's originally from El Paso, Texas. Gina Garcia is a junior political science and history major. She is involved with the Students for Sanctuary, a student group that organizes for immigrant justice in collaboration with the New Sanctuary Coalition. The last thing before beginning the event I want to say is that we will open questions to the general public, and we will ask you please to type your questions using the chat. So thank you very much. Next, Isabel, right?
Yes, so thank you. I have the honor of introducing Maria Hinojosa tonight. Maria Hinojosa is an award-winning journalist who reports on many of America's untold stories, from tales of hope in the Bronx to immigration policies in Nebraska to the first detention camps in the US. Ms. Hinojosa's nearly 30-year career includes reporting for PBS, CBS, WNBC, CNN, hosting and producing Latino USA on NPR, and founding and co-anchoring the political podcast In the Thick. In 2010, Ms. Hinojosa founded Futuro Media, an independent nonprofit organization that produces multimedia content to bring attention to experiences that are often underreported in mainstream media, all while mentoring the next generation of diverse journalists. In her memoir, Once I Was You, Hinojosa shares her intimate experience growing up Mexican-American in Chicago and offers a personal account of how the rhetoric around immigration has enabled the negligence of human rights in our country today. Barnard is honored to have her as a journalist in residence, teaching creative writing and journalism classes in the English department, and we are thrilled to have her here tonight to talk about her memoir. So with that, I will let her take it away.
Hey, everybody. How you doing? It's actually interesting for me to be addressing the Barnard community at 6:38 because usually this is when I'm waking up to get ready to teach my 9 a.m. class, which I did today. So it's like, oh, it's dark outside and I'm speaking to Barnard students. First of all, I miss you all. I miss all of my students. I'm thrilled to be at Barnard, where I was a proud Latin American Studies major with minors in Women's Studies and Political Economy. Back when I graduated, they didn't have a Latin American Studies department, so it was a whole thing about that. And I am so thrilled to now be a professor and to have students who I talk to on a daily, weekly basis who are part of the community. And in my classes, actually, I bring my students along for the ride with me. I try to teach off the record in the sense that I'm sharing with my students a lot of the behind the scenes experience of what it's like to be a professional, to be a writer, to be a Latina in multiple different professions that I work in. And so someone like Sam Ortega, who is part of this conversation, was one of my first students. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Sam, we did that thing that is no longer happening, which is when you told me you were from El Paso, and I had just recently returned from El Paso, covering the massacre there a year ago. I stood up and we hugged each other. That's not happening right now, and I miss it terribly. But what I try to do in my classes is to create a real sense of intimacy and safe space so that we can share about ourselves and our experience. And I bring that into the classroom. So I'm trying to remember what I might have been sharing with Sam a year ago when we were in class and the book had just been finished and we were, I think we were still struggling with the title. I don't even know if we had a title then. Oh my God, that was really painful. We did not have a title. And that might be a good place for me to start, actually. Some authors write a book and they have the title first. That was not the case. For me, I'm a journalist that works on usually relatively tight deadlines. So writing a book does not come naturally to me. Mostly when I thought back about writing my first two books, the first one was called Cruise, Gang Members Talk to Maria Hinojosa. It was a young adult book of interviews with not exactly gang members. They were members of Cruise here in New York. And then that was very simple. That was not simple, but it was interviewing, logging the interviews, and then editing the interviews. It was like a Studs Terkel book. And then I was asked to write Raising Raul, which was a motherhood memoir, a Latina motherhood memoir. It was basically Mommy Lit before Mommy Lit existed. And that process actually, I don't know what it's called now, but I wrote part of the book. The president of Barnard at the time was Judith Shapiro, and I needed to be able to write while I was nursing my daughter. And so I asked the president of Barnard if she could lend me a dorm room during the day. So I was in Brooks or something like that. I don't know. It's that, the quad, the front quad. I was in one of those rooms and I would ride my bike with my baby, and then I'd write in the room, and that way I could nurse when she woke up, and then I'd get back to writing. So part of Raising Raul was written in a Barnard College dorm room. And the book was a beautiful book, but it didn't sell. And in the world of publishing, it's all about sales. So I really didn't want to write another book. It was very hard. It's a lot of work. I mean, a lot of work, a lot of discipline, a lot of hours. And something that happened 4 years ago, exactly in this election period 4 years ago, I had a moment with someone on MSNBC. This person is a Trump surrogate, and he used the term illegal to refer to a human being. He called people illegal immigrants. He said the illegals. And I stopped him and corrected him on national television. I said, there's no such thing as an illegal human being. Illegal is not a noun. That's the first things that the Nazis did, was to declare the Jews to be an illegal people. So we do not define people as illegal. And I thought at that point, a dear friend said, that's your next book. Write illegal is not a noun. And I was like, I can see writing that book. And the vision that I had for writing that book was that I was like, oh, I'll write a little pocket book. Now, most of us are not out and about. Tomorrow I'm going to be in an airport. I haven't been in an airport since March. Usually I was in an airport 2-3 times a week. And in the airports, you remember, you'd go get your candy and your water and your magazine. And then you'd have like these little pocketbooks like Chimamanda Adichie, We Are All Feminists. And I was like, I can write the book, Illegal is Not a Noun. And it'll be a little pocketbook, and it'll be right there when you check out. You'll just buy that. You'll read it in one airplane ride, and it'll be done. And I was like, I can do that. Short and sweet. But by now my agent had retired, so I had to find a new agent. That took several months. Meanwhile, I was writing, and then found an agent and wrote up a proposal to try to do Illegal is Not a Noun. And the publishing world was not interested. I talk about this with my students a lot. I mean, I got rejected by everybody. There was one house that was somewhat interested, but they really had a problem with the pocketbook. And I think it's because they just don't think that those books sell. So they asked me instead to not write a little book, but to write a big book. And I was like, what do you mean a big book? And they were like, we want it to be a thinking book, a book that makes an impact. So it's beyond just a memoir. And I think I may have talked about in my class, you know, some of the struggles of writing. But once we were done with the book, then Michelle Herrera Mulligan, my Irish-Mexican Chicagoan editor at Simon & Schuster, said, okay, great, you're done with the book. Now can you go back and write an introduction? And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I just finished this and now you want me to write an introduction? I wrote that, that's page 1. And it was like, no, you have to write an introduction. And the great American writer, Sandra Cisneros, who's a friend of mine, and something of a muse for me, told me, you know, as you embark on the writing of this book, you don't have to always write about the things that you remember. Sometimes you can write about the things you wish you could forget, the things you've forgotten, the things you've wanted to forget, the things you don't want to remember. And so when I had to write the introduction, I remembered a scene that I came upon in the airport in early 2018 when I was on the US-Mexico border in McAllen. I was able to understand what I was seeing in front of me, which was a group of children that was being trafficked. I use that word on purpose. The definition of trafficking is someone who does not know who is taking them anywhere, does not know where they are going, does not have access to their documents, and has been told not to speak to anyone. Those children fit this description. They had been taken from their family members. They had been put into that huge converted Walmart where they are holding children in cages. And because used to be in airports all the time, I understand airport body language. And I saw this little girl, beautiful. Usually little girls at the airport, especially Latina little girls, are often really happy in an airport. Even if it's 7 o'clock in the morning, they're sleepy. They're like jumping about, they're playing, they're like running around. They've got smiles on their faces because they're about to get on a plane. And this little girl struck me because she was basically catatonic. And I was like, well, is she sleepy? And then I zeroed in and connected with her eyes. And I was like, she's there, but she's not there. And then I zoomed out and I was like, oh my God, she's one of these kids. And they're all wearing these very ill-fitting sweatsuits. I had already seen this happening before, but didn't know what I was witnessing. And now I knew. Now I was on the lookout. And so that's my opening introduction. That's redundant. That's the introduction. And I tell the story of this encounter. I say, you know, I was witnessing in the gentlest of ways the greatest horror of the United States of America, which is the taking of children as a form of punishment, as a policy to punish their parents and the children. And I was prohibited from speaking to, I got close to her. I had my microphone. I interviewed her without anybody realizing what was happening. And then they were, you know, put in line to get on the plane. And I was told I could not speak to the kids. And so then I started speaking out loud in Spanish so that the children, there was a group of them, just about a dozen of them. And I started saying in Spanish, and I'll say it in Spanish. I was like, es que estos niños tienen el derecho de hablar con una periodista. Ellos tienen el derecho de hablar con una periodista en este país Y ellos tienen el derecho de saber que hay gente en este país que quiere saber cómo están, que hay gente que están al tanto de ellos, que quieren que sepan de que son queridos en este país, que nadie los ve a ellos como un problema. Quiero que ellos sepan de que hay gente en este país que quieren que ellos estén bien, que los queremos. And then I wrote in the book, you know, I wanted her to hear me. I wanted her to know that I see you because once I was you. Because by that time, when I wrote the introduction, I had already finished the book. That by that time, it had already been revealed to me very clearly through my own mother calling me in a state of trauma and shock that my arrival to this country that came with privilege, that came with a green card, that came with a plane ride from Mexico City to Dallas and then another plane to Chicago to meet my father, who was a medical doctor at the University of Chicago. We had privilege, not wealth, but privilege. And it was only in 2018 when my mother called me after hearing the voices of those babies and toddlers. We heard their screams for their parents. It was only after that that my mother called me in tears herself, now in her 80s, and that she was able to actually recognize and name the trauma, which is that when we arrived at that airport, the immigration agent in 1962 said to my mother, "Oh, it's okay, ma'am. You can come into the country. I'm just going to keep your little girl, the baby in your arms. We think she has a rash, that she has measles. We're going to put her into quarantine. We're going to keep her here in Dallas, but you can go on to Chicago with your 3 other kids." To which my mother lost it. I was just interviewed by a Black journalist from the AP just before this. We did an event for the National Press Club. And she told me that in that moment, she said, "Maria, your mother went all Black woman on that immigration agent." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's the best. That's the best. That's like, I can't wait to tell my mom, you know, tomorrow, Ma, lo que pasa es de que you became all Black woman." And I was like, and you know what? The reason why Black women do that is because they know trauma. They know trauma. And so my mother, in that moment when the immigration agent said, "Well, we're just going to keep her," she lost it and she went into a state of panic. And that is when the only thing that she had was her voice and her sense of privilege. And she started yelling back at the immigration agent, and not yelling, screaming. I'm going to ask her now when I see her. I'm going to ask her to reenact it. I need to know. Of course, now she's in her 80s, but she said to me when she made that phone call, when everything became clear to her what had really happened, that she was one of those women who almost had their child taken away. She said to me, it wasn't just that I was yelling at the immigration agent. She said, I used a tone in my voice that I had never used in my life before. She said, it was a scream that was a scream of panic and trauma. She couldn't fight or flee. So all she could do was use her voice. And I used to, you know, when I first heard the story and I didn't know the context, I used to be like, oh my God, my mom is such a big mouth, such a badass, such a chingona, that she spoke up to an immigration agent who was like, but we didn't really understand the context. The agent wanted to take me from her arms, was going to attempt to do that. And in the realizing of all of this and in the writing of it, you know, even in the beginning of writing Once I Was You, I remember telling my editor, I was like, who knows why that immigration agent would take me? Like, what a weird dude. Like, where was he going to put me? I mean, what a fluke. Like, how strange that this would happen. I mean, that's the way that I talked to myself, which is crazy. Because actually what we know now is that I wasn't a fluke. There was a policy on the books in the state of Texas that actually began in El Paso. And it's a policy that goes way back to a eugenicist who basically started talking about Mexicans on the Mexican side of the border who were coming into El Paso to work. He began to espouse false theories. We know about that. And spreading rumors that Mexicans were dirty. You know the slur, dirty Mexican. There's a reason why that is the slur that is applied to us. And I believe it started in El Paso. And so on the books, actually, the bodies of Mexicans were legally deemed to be able to be searched. That's the cat. Body cavity searched, physically searched. And so when all of this, towards the end of writing the book, when all of this was kind of coming, I had to actually go to write the end of the book because of the El Paso massacre. Like I had finished, and then all of a sudden this happened. And so I had to go in and kind of figure out how to address that, but make it uplifting at the same time. And this was when one of the greatest revelations for me occurred. And I'll just tell this final full circle, and then I'll open it up to questions. So when I was a little girl growing up on the south side of Chicago, Mexican kid, I remember at one point understanding what happened with the Nazis. And I became a little obsessed. And even my obsession about what happened in World War II, how is it possible that 6 million people, 6 million Jewish people could be killed? How is it possible that people were gassed? Like what was happening? It was modern America. It was the 1940s. How did this happen? How could this happen? If it happened then, could it happen again? Like I was a little obsessed. And I'm not Jewish. So to bring it all together, that experience of me almost being taken by an immigration agent in Dallas, Texas, an experience that I think traumatized not only my mother, but myself in the deepest, like cellular way. And then I drew it back. It was a policy that was on the books in El Paso that stayed on the books until the year 1964 about the bodies of Mexicans that were deemed dirty, that were searched in El Paso. And at that point, at the highest point of the body searching for dirty Mexicans, what they were doing is that they were actually gassing the clothing of Mexicans. They were actually not gassing people. They were spraying them with DDT, which is a very harmful anti-pesticide, a rather pesticide. They would spray Mexicans con el polvo, they would say, with the white dust. But they took their clothes and they built structures in El Paso where they would take the clothing of the Mexicans, lock it in these rooms, and gas the clothing. The Nazis became familiar with this. And so they got a hold of the architectural plans for those rooms that were built to gas our clothing. And they got a hold of the gas. And they said, why stop at clothing? That's my connection, what I believe my obsession was. to what happened in World War II. I was a dirty Mexican. I was one of those people who was deemed dirty enough that at one point my clothing would have been gassed, but that gas ended up being used against Jewish people in Nazi Germany. That's the kind of thing that happens when you write a book and you don't, I didn't know that all of that was going to come out. And that's the best part of writing a book. By the way, I'm not so afraid of writing another book, by the way, not public yet. So don't tweet this out, please. But I already have my next book contract. I am writing a young adult version of Once I Was You. That's happening. And they want me to write it. At first it was like, is it going to be a teenage version? And actually I was like, no, I want to go younger. So I'm thinking about like 10 to 12-year-olds, making the book accessible to them. And so that's partly what I'm embarking on now. A new project, another book. I'm not so afraid. I work with I now have the best editor who is my personal editor, the person who sees everything that I write. I don't remember Sam if she came to class, Katie Salisbury, who is not Latina. She's Asian from California. And we work beautifully together. So that's going to happen. And my dream, I mean, it's a dream. It's also a part of a nightmare, but you know, I hope that the little girl who I saw in the airport gets a hold of the book. The book is already released in Spanish. It's called Una vez fui tú. And there's going to be a young adult version. So somehow I hope that child gets a hold of this book and then finds me. That's what I'm really hoping. But anyway, I'm so thankful to be here with you. I'd love to have your questions, and I really appreciate the invitation to be here with all of you.
Thank you, Professor.
Oh, please, Maria, please.
Thank you for that explanation of the book and your process. And I really appreciated how you connected sort of immigration policy and law and how individuals really feel that in our experiences. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the importance to you of having the book in English and Spanish. I know you just touched on that a little bit about how your hope is that it will really reach that particular girl and other young children like her. But yeah, I was wondering if you could talk about that and sort of the process of producing the book in both languages.
So, so I'm going to be real with you because I am always real with my students, but just don't tweet this out also. To be very honest with you, the publishing world is really about Spanish language books in the United States. They don't really see it as a powerful market. They don't really see it as a big seller of books. I mean, I imagine that Jorge Ramos does good. I'd be interested to see how Ilia Calderon's book that was just released, how that book is doing. Also released in English and Spanish at the same time. So to be honest with you, like from a business perspective, it's not a business decision. In fact, in some cases, it can be a losing proposition. I can't remember now because I don't really focus on these things, and I don't do my work, thankfully. I don't like write a book or something like that to make money. That's why I teach, that's what pays my salary. But it's not about making money off of a book. But in this case, actually, the author actually has to end up paying for the translator. It's really weird. But my agent and I, Adriana Dominguez, she's a Latina Uruguayan, and we made a decision. This is important. It is important for this book to come out in English and in Spanish. It was very symbolic for me by the way, it was very painful. I mean, I wrote the English version. We hired a translator, but I write I write the way I talk. I write for radio. I'm accustomed to that. So in my writing, it's very like I'm telling you a story. That's what people like about it. I mean, I love the fact that, you know, people are saying, you know, beautifully written, you know, Publishers Weekly and all. I'm just like, oh my God, whoa, wow, what a writer, wow. Because I don't see myself as that kind of a writer. I see myself as a storyteller. So then having somebody translate it into Spanish, ay Dios mío, no, 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 no. It was, I have to be honest with you, it was really painful. It was really painful because if I had to write the book in Spanish, sería como otra cosa. O sea, mi español es hasta cierto punto limitado. O sea, hablo súper bien, pero mi vocabulario está bien, pero como que no, hablo muy casual, poco profesional, vamos a decir. And I really felt like the translating was coming out too, demasiado limpio, a little bit too too sanitized, sanitary.
Sterile, maybe.
Too sterile, thank you. It's COVID brain. Sometimes it's like, meh. So I was, you know, I had to push back, but then I feel bad because I'm like, oh my God, this poor woman is translating my book. Oh my God, how hard. So I did, I felt bad. Like I did feel bad, just like, no, you know, I mean, that is a way in which maybe I should be a little bit stronger. And I could have been like, no, no estoy satisfecha. But it was so hard for me. So what I'm really hoping is that those of you who read English and Spanish fluently in both, that you're able to read the Spanish version for me and tell me what you think. Now, I'm going to ask my mom that because she has both versions. But here's the thing that is making me so happy about releasing the Spanish version of the book. And I'm starting to see it more now. People saying, I bought it for my mother. I bought it for my tia. I bought it for mi papá. I bought it for my abuelita. I'm reading it in English. She's reading it in Spanish. Somebody else is listening to the audiobook. And so that just makes me ecstatic. The fact that maybe the parents of my students still feel more comfortable, even though they've been living in this country their whole lives, still feel more comfortable reading in Spanish. Y para mí eso vale todo, vale todo. So I'm very excited and I'm really glad. But you know, I'm going to Mexico and I was like, I would love to be talking about the book in Mexico, but it's not released in Mexico. It's a different process. So if Mexicans want the book, they have to buy it from the United States. It's not available yet in Mexico as through a Mexican editorial, which I would have to do, and I hope to do. I hope it gets translated into multiple languages. One of my students has a father who is a professor of Urdu in Missouri, and he wants to translate my book into Urdu. So I'm like, yes. And then I'm like, I hope it comes out okay.
Thank you so much for that. Now I'm going to go ahead and facilitate the rest of the Q&A, and I would invite people to go ahead and unmute themselves or put a question in the chat. Please feel free to ask any questions. So it looks like we have a question from Jess Barrios, and she says, how do you feel Barnard has shaped you?
Wow. All right, so straight up. So I did fall in love with Barnard. Like once my friend from high school came here, she was a Euro, and she was like, you got to come to Barnard and check it out. I totally was into the fact that Barnard was, because at that time there was no Columbia for women. Columbia was for men, Barnard was for women. I know it's like, what? So I totally loved the fact that it was a small women's college, but that I had this relationship with Columbia that was like the Ivy League. I didn't know that Barnard was a Seven Sisters school. I was like, I didn't even know what that was a concept. And I came to Columbia really 11 years after the 1968 student takeover of Columbia University. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, please look it up. It was a major part of the anti-war protest movement. It was like the equivalent of a massive Black Lives Matter rally that happened on the campus and in this neighborhood. It was a huge deal. And so I was kind of like, you know, Barnard and Columbia, these are places that are prepared for a rebellious student body. So I was a rebel on campus, to be honest. I mean, I was at WKCR. That was my life. There was no Barnard radio station. I did back then it was the Chicano caucus. I was part of ALA. But I was a bit of a rebel. I moved off campus after my first year at 616. I was living off campus on 108th Street when people were like, you went below 110th Street, what? You know, but Barnard let me live off campus. And at that time, I was not a Barnard rah, rah, rah kind of girl. You can look it up in the archives. I was one of the people that organized the protest against the awarding of a Barnard Medal of Honor to Jean Kirkpatrick, who was then the UN representative from the United States, who was very much involved in the wars in Central America and militarizing El Salvador and Guatemala. So myself and Laura Flanders, another esteemed great journalist, we organized to have Barnard rescind that Medal of Honor, which they did, and it became a whole conversation about freedom of speech, very similar to topics that have been brought up recently. And I don't know, I was a rebel. And this is why I love Barnard, is because with all of my rebelness, they still saw me. Maybe the administration at that time, the president was Ellen Futter. I don't think she liked me very much, but at that point I really wasn't interested. But the institution itself realized that this is the kind of women that we create at Barnard. I mean, Zora Neale Hurston. I mean, we can go down she was to me one of the biggest deals, you know, in terms of having gone to Barnard. So to me, Barnard was all about having that independent voice, that feminist voice. And a feminist voice is, as you know, an independent voice. A feminist voice is not a voice that is going to be shut down or quieted by any institution. We can work with institutions, but that's, you know, that was kind of the core. So I also think that were it not for Barnard, I think I really would have suffered in college. As you know, in the book, I talk a lot about my imposter syndrome. I had a lot of that at Barnard. But the thing was that I was taking classes where it was all women. There were smaller classes, and I felt completely comfortable to express my ideas. And then I would go to Columbia and take master's classes at School of International Affairs, or, you know, with these famous Columbia professors and such who never spoke to me. So I felt really seen at Barnard. And so in many ways, Barnard shaped me in that it was in the career services office where I went when I was still feeling very insecure. And it was the head of career services, Jane Gould, who was like, no, Maria, you are applying to that internship at NPR. That was Barnard. That was a woman seeing me and saying, you got to do this. I know you're afraid. I know you don't think you're good enough. You're doing it. And that's how it all started. I would have walked out of that office, the Barnard Career Services, and never applied had it not been for her. So I could go on and on and on. and you know, my daughter went to the Barnard College Toddler Center, so you know, she was like raised as a feminist. For those of you who don't know, in the Barnard College Toddler Center, which is like the toddler center to get into, those of you who are tied to Barnard have first dibs. But you know, at the Barnard College Toddler Center, they don't teach sharing. They teach children have a right to want their things. Little girls have a right to want their things, and they don't have to share. So at the Barnard College Toddler Center, they have 5 different of the same toy, so that if you have the toy and a kid wants it, you don't have to give it to him. How has Barnard shaped my life? That's my daughter, you know, who sadly didn't go to Barnard. She went to Brown. I tried. My granddaughter will go to Barnard. I'm sure of that if I have one. And now the joy of being back at Barnard with students like Gina and Sam, who are on this call, who come from such diverse backgrounds. I mean, to be honest with you, I do not like teaching on Zoom. And every week, Gina knows, I'm like, well, can we meet in the park? Can we do something? And the students are like, you know, we're all like all over the place, so no. And even on Zoom, my Barnard students are bringing it. Like Lily and I, my TA and I, we end every class and we're like, Jesus, whoa. We had just the most amazing class on Zoom. Emotional, crying, tears, you know, revealing of ourselves, guests coming in. And so it's the students. And I couldn't be more honored to be the inaugural Distinguished Journalist in Residence. It's the bomb. I'm hoping to not have to leave after 3 years. I'm working on it. Believe me, starting on January, I'm going to be opening those conversations to be like, so I know I may have to speak to your department.
Thank you so much. I can say personally, it's been such an honor to take a class from you as well, and I've really enjoyed my time having your course. But to be mindful of everyone's time, I'm going to ask the last question from the chat, and then we'll have some closing remarks from Orlando. And kind of on a similar topic, Sidra asks, were there any particular courses at Barnard that were pivotal for you?
Well, all of the classes that I took in Latin American studies and Latin American literature were pivotal. They were taught by a professor who was a visiting scholar from Chile, a refugee named Marcelo Codu. I don't know where Marcelo is now, but he changed my life. And many of those classes were very small. There were like 7 of us, 8 of us. He smoked during the entire class. He would open the window at Barnard Hall and smoke out the window. It was, no, actually it was, yeah, it was Barnard. No, it was Millbank. He would smoke in Millbank and open the windows. It was just really adorable. It was my professors, Bettina Birch, who was also a visiting scholar. She was a Marxist professor of economics. Alice Amsden, that was also a progressive economics professor. These classes just, you know, opened my mind, my mind to like political economy, to Marxist theory and thought, which was, you know, the manuscripts of 1844 really changed my mind. My women's studies classes, you know, just blew my mind all the time. I remember taking my first women's studies class at Barnard Hall and calling up my mom and just being like, Mom, you're such a feminista. And she was like, no, I don't wear my bra. And I'm like, yeah, Mom, you're a feminist. I know it because I'm studying women's studies. Interestingly, I did not. I took one class in the English department and it was the worst class that I took. So that's why it's special for me to be at the English department, because the one journalism class that I took is the one class that I didn't get an excellent grade in. And it almost traumatized me. And so in that way, that class almost took away all of my initiative to be a journalist. But I wrote an amazing piece that got published in the Barnard Bulletin about an Argentinian refugee. And it got published in the Barnard Bulletin. So I was like, yo, you're a bad professor and you don't really see me for who I am or what I'm writing. But I got a piece published in the Barnard Bulletin. So so I think that even my worst class was something that inspired me.
All right. Thank you very, very, very much, Maria. This was absolutely wonderful. I just want to thank you. I really feel that you are a perfect source of inspiration and the perfect example of the kind of education we want to offer at Barnard in general and at the Spanish department in particular. This was absolutely great, so inspiring and thought provoking. I want to thank you in the name of the department for that. And I also want to thank Isabel, Gina, Sam, and also my colleague Ronald Briggs, who work a lot to make this possible. And yes, thank you very much for being here, everybody.
One last thing. I'm teaching next semester. Who knows if in person or not. Do take my class. I would love to see you there. We have a lot of fun. It's very emotional, to be honest with you. We go deep. And if you get my book, let me know. You know how to find me. And I will be happy if I don't see you in person and if we don't meet up. Let my assistant know. Everybody knows how to find Lily. You can find her easily through my email at Barnard. I will sign a sticker, a Once I Was You sticker. I will dedicate the book and I'll send that to you. I am going to do this all by hand. It's going to be me writing the envelope, signing it, and putting it. So it may take a while. But if you get the book and you want that signed sticker for your book, just reach out and let me know, and I'll get it to you. And thank you so much. I really appreciate this. And let's do it again. No estoy lejos, estoy aquí cerquita, parte de la comunidad, y me da mucho gusto poder estar con el Departamento de Español. La verdad, me da como mucho orgullo estar con ustedes.
Muchas gracias, María.
Is that goodbye, you guys?
Muchas gracias.
If you have another question, I'm happy to take it. It's 7:22. I thought we were going for another 8 minutes. So if you have a question.
Maria, can I actually share something with you, or an article?
Yes, Sam, of course.
I actually ended up writing about the bath riots in El Paso and the Cyclone B incident, and I got it published through a magazine on Kind, and I really wanted to share it with you because I remember I discussed it with you very early on, and then I made it happen. So I would love to send you that.
So proud of you. Please send it to me. You have my email, so send it to that one.
Okay, sounds great.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's so important that we do this work right now and that we just tell the truth about our history. So
I can go ahead and send it in the chat really quick as well.
You can do that, but send it to me separately because, Well, people, I'm off to do an event in half an hour in Chicago at my alma mater high school. So I guess it's the day of alma maters. If you don't have any more, I'm happy to take another question. But if not.
Any student questions? Any students want to ask a question?
Don't be shy.
I'll ask a question. Gracias por venir. This was really exciting. As a Mexican American también, I'm actually almost in tears seeing that I could talk to you. It's pretty dope. Pero te quería
Why
preguntar.
are you in tears? ¿Dónde estás tú?
Estoy ahorita en New York, pero soy de California.
Yo, pero no tienes que llorar porque estoy aquí. Ya vamos a estar juntas.
Right? It's just
but we do bring the emotion, and crying is so I cry all the time. All the time.
I cry all the time too. That's just how I roll. That's the only way I know how to diffuse. Pero cuando dijiste that you were going to make a book for YA, it made me realize that right now there's a group of Latinx people, mostly Latinas, that are creating their first Kid Lit festival. It's a Kid Lit. I'm actually volunteering with them because I used to do sponsorship for my community college. I used to be the one that called Pero like, it would be so dope if I could connect it with them. Cause I mean, I don't want to cuss, but you're effing amazing. And I mean, this is their first year, but I mean, next year, maybe like when your book
Oh,
actually comes
hell
out
yeah.
for the
Oh,
YA,
absolutely, for
I
sure.
mean, like, I would love to figure out how to connect y'all because it would be so amazing for
Just
both
connect
ends.
us. Just connect us. Make it happen. Actually, Lily, my TA, is actually doing all the bookwork support. También Mexicana from Chicago. But yeah, absolutely connect us.
So
I
you also general studies, so I don't know how to get Barnard like emails or anything.
so just
Es la
email
única cosa
me.
que no sé.
Es muy fácil. Maria@latinousa.org. And I just want to say, ¿cómo te llamas?
Jennifer Cardenas?
Jennifer. I just want to say, Jennifer, what kind of a chingona you are, that you started at community college and that you're now here. It is mera mera chingona. I'm so proud of you. And by the way, Lily, my assistant, full Zapoteca, from Chicago, also started at community college and then ended up at DePaul University, and now just had her first story published on Latino USA. You can read it. It's up on Latino USA. It's called From Chicago to Oaxaca and COVID. She lost family members from COVID. And Lily, like you, started at community college and is now a writer. So I'm just so proud of you.
Yeah, I'm already crying. Ah, te
I'm
digo,
so
te
proud
digo.
of you. You have no idea. I'm
Thank you.
gonna start crying too, because I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. where you have all of the challenges against you to a certain degree, you know, in terms of going to a community college and how community colleges are seen and often disrespected, and that you had the vision to just be like, yeah, man, I'm taking this seriously. I love speaking at community colleges. If I could speak at, oh my God, I just love speaking at, I mean, one of my favorite places is Bunker Hill Community College in outside of Boston, BMCC here. I mean, could just go on. So I hope to meet you in person, Jennifer, y darte ese
Thank you.
abrazo que te mereces. Porque
Gracias.
eres una mera, mera chingona.
Thank you.
And yeah, so
Gracias.
we'll connect for the, oh my God, my agent is going to love that. So excited.
Totally. And I already have your book. I've been reading it. So you're going to hear from me a lot.
Claro que sí.
Gracias. Adios. I have to go do homework.
Okay, any last questions? Boy, it's like really just trickling down. Ay, tan linda, no llores, no llores. Ya nos vamos a ver en persona. Okay, family, I'm going to go to Chicago to my alma mater and see you next time.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. Gracias.
Thanks, Maria.